Welcome to the next episode of Just Peachy. I'm Peachie Thompson and I'm your host. Just Peachy is a show where we interview leaders and subject matter experts in the fields of insurance, finance, and taxes. We also have a lifestyle section where we talk about everything and anything under the sun. I'm so excited to introduce to you to our next guest speaker. She is an awesome estate planning attorney and a senior partner at McKillop Law Firm. Please welcome Miss Julia McKillop. Julia, thank you so much for joining us today and welcome.
Thank you so much for having me.
Fantastic. So Julia, you just moved from somewhere to Jacksonville, right?
Sarasota, yeah.
Sarasota. So tell us a little bit about yourself, please,
Yeah,
and how
of course.
you've come to become an estate planning attorney.
Will do. Well, I'm a born and raised Floridian. So I grew up in South Florida. My dad's a lawyer. He's retired now. So I grew up around lawyers. He was a solo practitioner. So I got to see in his office a lot of other women solo practitioners, having that balance with family and career, which was really neat to see that growing up. And so, just being exposed to the law, it's sort of a natural thing that happened. Ended up meeting my husband in law school at University of Florida. We ended up in Sarasota and we started the firm, about 14, 15 years ago. So it's been a little while. And then my brother-in-law joined in with us about 9 years ago. He's here in Jacksonville. So we made the decision to be closer to family, join up under one roof with the firm, and move to Jacksonville about a year ago. And so I started my practice in 2007 in litigation, which was not a happy place for me. I always knew that the contention of litigation was not the right thing. But I always was very interested in estate planning, that ability to create safety nets for yourself and your family, and to work collaboratively with people and other professionals, with clients. So I started transitioning into estate planning about 12 years ago and really went into it full time. It was my primary practice area about 10 years ago. So it's been a little while. And I very much enjoy it. It's a good fit for me.
Yes, and that's really important. I love your journey, being born into basically the law world, right?
Mm-hmm.
So it gives you a very different perspective than someone not really knowing or seeing or experiencing someone in their family go through the process. Not that there's anything wrong with not having it, but I think being born into that, seeing your dad probably do the things that he did is vital to you being a successful lawyer.
Yeah.
So today we're going to talk about, and I wanted to dig deep into not really estate planning, but more incapacity planning, right? So I guess it's a part of the estate planning, but we're not going to be digging deep into transferring wealth. So with the National Estate Planning Awareness Week this October, I know this is a very timely topic. So I'm going to let you just kind of tell us a little bit about that, please. And, what's happening.
Yeah, absolutely. So Congress started the National Estate Planning Awareness Week about 14 years ago, with the idea being that they wanted to raise the awareness of the public about just how important estate planning is to financial wellness. A lot of people really enjoy the conversation with their financial planners because they're growing the wealth. That's really exciting. They get the insurance because that's important. And everybody tells you, get that life insurance, get that disability insurance. And then the estate planning it's so important because what we're doing with estate planning is we are transferring wealth to the next generation. And we're also protecting the money and protecting your assets and your family if there is an incapacity, which is all wrapped up in that financial well-being. So a little bit harder conversations, but so important to that financial wellness, that whole picture. The National Estate Planning Awareness Week this year is from October 17th to the 23rd, which just so happens to be next week from the date of our recording. It's definitely a really important topic.
Absolutely. Not a lot of people think that they need estate planning. I know some of my clients often come to me and say, well, estate planning is just for the wealthy. And
Hmm.
not everyone understands that it's not.
Right.
It is
Right.
not.
Yeah. There's this misconception that estate means that you have to have all this money, because we think of the word estate as like a big, huge house and a mansion and like all
Yes.
these big things. Really, in the legal sense, estate just means what you own. What is your stuff? So it can be a house and a car and an IRA and some life insurance. And suddenly, next thing you know, when you start adding that all together, there's some significant assets to plan for. And then, of course, we get the incapacity side, which is a totally different thing where everybody needs it. So,
Right, right. And so, speaking of incapacity, what
mhm.
exactly does that mean, Julia?
Sure, sure. Yeah. And it has it's a gray area, right? It has a lot of different sort of permutations on how you can look at it. But really what it comes down to is if you're incapacitated, so you lack the capacity to manage your own property or to make decisions about yourself. That's really what it comes down to. Whether that incapacity is because of an illness or mental illness or deficiency, physical illness, or intoxication. So sometimes we get into incapacity matters if there's a drug addiction or things like that happening. So it really comes down to being able to manage yourself and your stuff. And if you're not able to do that either partially or all the way, then you have a level of incapacity going on. And that is different from disability. I wanted to make that distinction. Disability is an impairment, could be mental, physical, but you could still have full capacity. For an example, if somebody's in a wheelchair, they might have a disability, but they can still make decisions for themselves and care for themselves and make decisions about their health care and their finances. So those are two very different things.
And I heard you say a lot. So, and it makes me believe that incapacity planning or incapacity doesn't apply to just the older people.
Correct.
So it's not based on your age, doesn't matter.
Right. Absolutely. In fact, I have a lot of clients who, when their kids start turning 18, they have their child contact me and we talk about incapacity planning at the very least, because parents no longer have the legal ability to make decisions for their kids at that point. And they cannot, if there was an accident, there's certain abilities I'll talk a little bit about later for a parent to make emergency decisions. But if there's a long-term incapacity, you lose that ability. Financially, forget it. You can't help. So it really starts as soon as somebody becomes 18, that there is a need to start talking about incapacity planning and having everything put into place.
Wow, I never really thought of it that way.
Mm-hmm.
And you're absolutely right. You have I have a teenager now, right? And in several years she's going to go off to college, she's going to start driving and she'll
Mm-hmm.
be able to make decisions on her own.
Yeah.
And I never really thought about that where wow, if something happens, what's the extent of what I can do on her behalf?
Right.
So are you saying that now I need a plan for that? And there's legal documents that needs to be put together,
When she
right?
turns 18, you just have her give me a call and
All
we'll put
right.
everything in place.
Wow. Okay. So that's really, really important. I know most
Yeah.
people are like me. We have so much stuff going on,
Oh,
and
totally.
who's thinking about your child turning 18 and thinking about being incapacity? It's just like life
Right.
insurance. Like nobody wants to talk about it. Nobody wants to talk about
Sure. And of course, statistically, the chances of a young adult to really need any of that is quite low. You're
it.
talking
Sure.
about a major accident or unforeseen event to happen, right?
Correct.
So just like you get car insurance for the just in case, of course, we have to get it, but
Yes. Yes.
um,
That was
but
mandated.
this is yeah, but this is the same kind of thing. It's there for the just in case.
Right. So is that something, let's say I did this planning or my daughter does this planning.
Mhm.
I assume that that's not a permanent thing, right? Where she could
Correct.
change it in the future?
Right.
Should her wishes change? And
Absolutely. And I think you hit on another misconception about estate planning in general is that you do your estate plan and then you never have to think about it again, which is not true. So let's take your daughter. She turns 18. She's probably going to have, you or, another close family member is in a lot of the roles that we name in the incapacity documents. And then maybe she gets married and she'll want to update the document so that her spouse has the primary role. So as life changes, the plan's going to shift. The conversation shifts a little bit. You start having kids, you start a business, and there's certainly like major life events that will start affecting estate plan. Somebody retires, there's a loss in the family. Those kind of things are going to trigger a need to look at it and just make sure the estate plan is still functioning correctly. Yeah.
Right. So, Julia, let's just say, okay, I have forgotten about this podcast with Julia. I'm just going to go on with my life and we don't do this. Right. What happens?
So if there is an incapacity that happens, there's an accident, could be short-term, could be long-term. And if the family needs to be able to make decisions, so there's two sides of the decisions. We have an incapacity, there's a medical, and then we have the financial. So on the medical side, Florida at least has proxy statutes. So if you're in an emergency, in the emergency room and somebody needs to be making decisions, Florida is going to say, okay, these people can do that in this order. So it's going to look at parents, look at spouses. It actually starts with spouse, then parents, then adult children, and sort of goes down this list of priority of who can make medical decisions for you. If it turns into a longer term incapacity, that proxy statute is not designed for that. It's not meant to be a long-term decision-making ability. So that's where you could get into a little bit of a problem, and I'll talk about that in a second. And then we have on the financial side, if somebody gets in an accident and let's say they're in a coma for a month and the family needs to access the bank account in order to make the mortgage payment, they cannot do it unless there's either pre-planning in place with the incapacity planning, or they got to go to the guardianship courts. So that's really the alternative. If people don't have the planning done, there's a mechanism to get a person in place to be making these medical and financial decisions, but they have to go to guardianship courts to do it. Guardianship is a last resort type of situation, because really what the courts are doing is they're taking away an individual's ability to make decisions for themselves. And then there's a whole process. Attorneys have to be involved. It's a court case. So a judge gets appointed. There's evaluations that happen. And then eventually the judge will appoint a guardian. There's a guardian of the person, which is in charge of the medical decisions. And there's guardian of the property, who is in charge of the financial decisions. Could be the same person, could be different people. There's possibilities of needing a guardian of the person and not the property. So it can get a little complicated in there. Long story short is the guardianship is public, it's expensive, and it can be very litigious because the family can start fighting over who's going to be in charge. So that's the alternative if you don't do the pre-planning, is that it could end up in a guardianship situation, and it's not a pretty process.
Wow. So as you're talking, I'm thinking, is this the same as what happened to Britney Spears?
Yes, Britney Spears was in a guardianship. I don't know all the details on it, so I can't give you all of like the play-by-play on what happened there. But yeah, she was in a guardianship with her, I think it was her dad. There was that was her guardian. Yeah.
That was a long time, and that was a very messy divorce, so to speak, with the guardianship that she had. And to think, like you said, it's family members. How awful is that? I mean, I don't know much about her situation. I didn't follow it. It was just so popular that I know it, even though I have not paid much attention to it. Right. So, Julia, how do we avoid guardianship? I guess we've sort of kind of danced around it a little bit, but how do we avoid that?
Sure. So you got to do all of the planning, the pre-planning, and that's where the estate planning comes into play. So, we touched a little bit on like estate plan, and estate planning or incapacity planning being part of the estate planning process. You have a wonderful podcast, your very first one, with a local attorney here who did a great job talking about the death side of estate planning and the transfer of wealth through wills and trusts. But this is the other side of that coin, which is the incapacity planning. So we put together a whole bunch of documents that creates a safety net, so that if there is a need, you've got the people in place who you want and giving them the legal ability to make these decisions for you. So to specifically get into the individual documents, I'll walk you through the handful of documents that we use for incapacity planning. So the first one is the durable power of attorney. And this is the financial durable power of attorney. So in here you are appointing an agent, or sometimes it's called an attorney, in fact, to step into your shoes and manage your finances for you, make your financial decisions, buy, sell, do whatever needs to be done financially. And they're stepping into your shoes and doing all these things in your best interest. In the legal world, we call that a fiduciary. So it's a very important role when I'm working with clients, where we talk a lot about who's the right fit, who's the right person. You got to really, really trust this person because they are making financial decisions for you with your money. Powers of attorney in Florida are effective immediately. So as soon as you sign that document, your agent can go do things for you. It's an interesting thing. Some states allow what's called springing powers, so that it hinges on you actually being deemed incapacitated. So it's important. It's very legal concept heavy, because there's also the ability in powers of attorney to have what's called special powers in Florida, at least, that allows your agent to do things like estate planning, financial planning, and gifting, and changing beneficiary designations, and long-term care planning, and Medicaid planning, and all these things that are even more than just paying a bill and selling a house, and managing the day-to-day finances. So, it can be a very, very robust document, or at the very least, you're giving your agent the ability to pay bills and liquidate assets if they need to be, if you're not able to. Little side note on the durable power of attorney too is, I mentioned it a little bit before, there's no alternative. It's either guardianship or durable power of attorney. I get at least one phone call a year from a potential client, and it's a family member usually saying, hey, my parent just had a stroke. They're in the hospital. We need to get into the accounts and make sure that the bills are getting paid. And I asked them, well, do they have a durable power of attorney? If the answer is no, I said, we can't do anything. I can't give you a durable power of attorney. We can't, because they're incapacitated. They can't sign it. So I have to refer them over to a guardianship attorney in order to start that process.
Wow. And that is one place you don't want to find yourself in. No. But what I'm hearing you say here, Julia, this piece of our podcast, is that this must be done before, not after some event has occurred.
Exactly. Pre-planning. Yes. Before. Pre-planning. Absolutely. Yeah.
That's right. That's right. So with that, I am curious. So if someone is doing an estate plan, how does this fit into a full-blown, when I say full-blown, comprehensive estate plan?
Sure. Yeah. So the power of attorney is lifetime financial management of assets. As soon as somebody passes away, their power of attorney is no longer a valid document. It goes away. That's when somebody passes away, the last will would kick in. If a probate's needed, the trust will become irrevocable. Successor trustee comes in, starts managing the assets per the terms of the trust at that point. So it fits in, because during the lifetime, if there's an incapacity, you've got a trusted person managing your assets for you. And then once you've passed away, then it flips over into the death side planning documents. And then it could be the same exact person. They just might be managing the assets under the other documents, right? Or maybe you have different people appointed into those roles, depending on what the estate plan looks like. So it all works together. and sort of flows together. And a well-designed estate plan is going to jive like that. So, and then we have a handful of documents working on the medical side of the incapacity planning. Sometimes estate planning attorneys will put all of these documents together into one. They call it like a medical durable power of attorney, which is fine. I personally prefer separating each of the documents into the separate documents because I find that each of them are doing something a little bit different. Statutorily, the law that's telling us how to do these things and where that our ability to make these documents come from slightly different sources. So I like to have them separate. So the first one is the designation healthcare surrogate. This is the big one. This is who do you want in charge of making your medical decisions for you? Consent to treatment, withdrawal of consent, facilities you might be at. This is the really important medical decision stuff. Mm-hmm. And there's some overlap here with that proxy statute I was telling you about in Florida. So, if you didn't have a healthcare surrogate, your proxy could come in and make some of these initial decisions. But if there's a long-term incapacity, your healthcare surrogate document is really going to be in charge of all of that stuff. We also have a living will. Living will is a really simple document. It's like 2 pages and it's a very easy document to fill out and sign. But concept-wise, it's so important because really what the living will is saying is, what is your decision? What's your choice? If there is an end of life situation, would you want to be kept alive artificially? There was a very big case here in Florida, in the 90s, early 2000s, Terry Schiavo. I don't know if you remember that case or aware of it.
Yes.
It was a big one and it hit national news. And it was a situation where the family was fighting over, there was a lot of things they were fighting over, but one of the big things they were fighting over was, would she want to be kept alive in a persistent vegetative state? And if she had had a living will, that decision would have been made because she would have put her decision down on paper. That would be the evidence of her decision. So that's what the living will is.
When I was actually my first child, and it was the first time that I really was going into something major in my life because I was in my 20s,
right?
And I didn't have these things. And at the hospital, they said you have to fill out this form, and I looked at it, and it asked me exactly that. I read it, and it said, would you like to be kept alive, essentially, or be on a ventilator or whatever to or end your life, right? So it essentially asked that. That was really hard.
Mm-hmm.
It was really hard to make that decision.
Right. Especially when you're not expecting it, because you're going into the hospital, have a baby, and then they're asking you, well, what do you want to do?
Correct. That's exactly right, Julia. And I sat there for a good 5 minutes looking at that document and thinking, wow, wait, I'm bringing life into this world. I'm not thinking about my life, right? Like there's this, and at that moment I realized, okay, this should have been done before I'm in pain, because at that time I'm already in pain. And
you're in labor, it's coming, right? Yes. Well, it's interesting you mentioned that because when I went into the hospital to give birth to my first son, the nurse who was doing the intake, it was really fun because they always ask you, do you have like a living will and your documents? And I answered, of course, yes, because I'm an estate planning attorney. So of course I have it. And she looked at me, she was like, nobody's ever said yes before.
Right. Because
young, healthy, a lot of people don't think of it, right?
Exactly. My mortality was never in my mind, even though I've been in the insurance business in my teens, literally.
Right.
And at that moment, it hit me. Wow.
Right.
So really, that brings me, I can talk to you about this more, but this kind of brings us towards the end of our podcast. Who would need incapacity planning? Let's just kind of spell it out for the listeners.
Well, we sort of touched on it before, right? Everyone, really, as long as you're an adult and you have capacity, do the incapacity planning, and it can be so easy. Some of the concepts can be difficult, and the more assets and the more complexity in the family and the asset structure, the more of a conversation you need and guidance through the process. Some people don't necessarily really need that, and that's okay. And there's other resources out there where people can have access to basic core incapacity planning documents, especially the healthcare side, at very low cost, and just have that thought process before they're in the hospital in the intake.
Yes, those are good points. One other set, I guess I would say, like, one other group of people that I think would really want to think about this is those people that will be going into long-term care pretty soon.
Absolutely.
I
absolutely.
do have a lot of, I'm in the long-term care insurance business, and I know that there are times where it is a mess.
Absolutely.
When the family is deciding, oh, yes, we have long-term care insurance, but now what? What do we use? Where do we use it? When do we use it? Right. And if there's no one point of contact that is the person designated by the individual, in this case, it's usually mom or dad or grandma or grandpa, then it becomes a mess. So I imagine.
And that's why a lot of people, as they start getting older, there's a big influx of the percentage of people who have an estate plan by the time they around retirement or after retirement goes up significantly, because they're starting to think, oh, here's the next stage of that natural progression of life, right?
Yes.
So it's a normal thing to see that. And then it's when we can spark that knowledge in younger people also, that, hey, this is really needed, just like insurance on your car or other things that we do to protect ourselves and our family. It's really, really important.
Yeah. Can they do this online, or is this a thing that you have to have an attorney?
Yeah. So, of course, I'm an attorney and I want to say, yes, you should always use an attorney. Well, you don't have to. There's a lot of resources online. There's tons. I'm not going to even name a whole bunch of them, but there's one in particular that I have found for the medical incapacity planning is quite good. It's called 5wishes.org. It is so inexpensive. I think it's like $15. It's been a little while since I looked at it. And it's a very, very simple form. Fill it out and it gets the basics. It gets the healthcare surrogate living will. We didn't talk much about, there's, HIPAA authorizations that we also do, and pre-need guardian that we do also. So if a guardianship were needed for any reason, you're naming who your guardian. So we there's some other stuff in there too. 5 Wishes covers most of that. And it's a great resource for people who just want to have something in place, don't have a very complicated situation, don't have much. And it's going to do the basic stuff. For the durable power of attorney, and when situations get a little bit more complicated, it's so nice to have an attorney, because an attorney is going to guide you through the process. This is what we do. We know the law, we know the documents, and can also give a lot of life experience of, hey, we've seen this happen before. I get asked a lot, how many people can I name as, for example, my healthcare surrogate, and be careful of too many cooks in the kitchen. So there's things that we can talk about and help guide people through. I've also seen with the online resources, there can be a lot of user error. So you might be asked a question and not necessarily know what it means, and then put a wrong answer, or an answer that creates ambiguity or conflict with the other document or other parts of the document. So, of course, having an attorney walk you through that process, we're a guide for it.
You're so honest. I would say that just talking to you about this, if someone can afford to go to an attorney, I wouldn't do this online. This is one of those things. I know in the world that we live in, everything is researchable, accessible through online. But the fact of the matter is, we are trained professionals in what we do. Absolutely. And personally, if money is not much of an issue, I think it's worth the investment to see an attorney like you.
Totally agree. And what you would pay for an attorney to walk you through the process, your family will save just tremendous, amounts more from if they did have to go into guardianship or deal with prolonged legal battles and everything else, from both financially, and there's the pain and suffering that goes along with those processes. So yes, if you can afford it, then having an attorney is going to, a professional who knows what they're doing. You know that you're going to get a plan that's functioning, that's accomplishing your goals, taking care of your family the way that you want them to be taken care of. I have a lot of clients throughout the estate planning process where at some point, usually as we're reviewing documents or, designing the estate plan, and they'll say, man, I would have never thought of that. I'm so glad that you asked me that question, or that we're going through this topic, because there's a lot in there.
Yes. And I would totally, I always say this, estate planning is very similar to what I do. When, if you love someone or something besides yourself, you're going to do this, right? And I'd rather pay, let's just say, I don't know how much it is for every attorney has different fees. Let's just say I'd rather pay $1,000 to draft a solid plan for me, so that I don't burden my daughters or my husband if some event occurs that it would be a burden to them. Versus I go online, maybe I pay $500 to do it and kind of do it myself. Well, I am not an attorney. I have no experience in doing this for other people. And I just feel like it's very important to seek the advice of someone who really knows what they're doing, right?
Absolutely. Yeah.
Yes. No. So Julia, I know a lot of people like me have a lot of questions for you, because now I got myself thinking, okay, I got to take care of some of the stuff. So how do people get a hold of you after this podcast?
Yeah. So our website is McKilloplawfirm.com. And maybe you can post a little thing. I don't know how podcasts work. Can you put
Yes, well, for the listeners, we kind of have to spell it out right. It's McKilloplawfirm.com, McKilloplawfirm.com.
There you go.
Fantastic. Well, Julia, thank you so much for your time. I appreciate you being on the show. I enjoy this talk, and I look forward to seeing you soon.
Absolutely. Me too. Thanks so much for having me.
Have a great day.
Thanks. You too.
Information shared during the show are opinions of the speakers. They are not legal, financial, or tax advice specific to you. Consult your own specialist, attorney, accountant, financial planner, or insurance advisor for your specific situation.